Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited to share my conversation today with Dhalia Balmir. She is an incredible woman that has come into our life a bit recently, a relatively new business owner, and she is a consultant. She transitioned out of her career last year in 2018 to build a diversity consulting and writing business. And she is working towards, of course, as we all are as entrepreneurs, living the dream. She's worked for Fortune 500 technology companies over the path of about 12 years. And she's worked in contract and supplier management. She's expanded her interest into diversity and inclusion through leading a female-led and African-American-led employee network. There, she worked on building strategic partnerships, other diversity employee networks, and of course, also while influencing some of the initiatives around recruitment efforts, mentorship, and development for female and Black employees. So important. She is a writer. In fact, I know she often, as often as she can, attends Writers Lounge at Hera Hub. So she really loves helping others find their voice through writing. So welcome to the show today, Dhalia.
Thank you, Felina. I'm very excited to be here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's dive into your background.
Okay.
Take us back and tell us about you.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to take it way back. I'm originally from Haiti. My parents immigrated here when I was 4 years old, and we moved to Michigan. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. And
wow, that's a bit of a different climate and culture from Haiti. My goodness.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big difference. I often wonder, it's interesting because my parents came from a tropical island, and the transition to, the Michigan climate, right? So you have all four seasons. And I believe that when we came here, it was it was moving towards the dead of winter. So you can imagine they were probably a little shocked.
Yeah, my goodness,
parents.
that is a shock. And what brought them? Yeah, what brought them there?
What brought them? So what brought them here? My mother. So let me just give you a little bit of history. So, in the 70s, you experienced there was a huge mass exodus of a lot of professionals in Haiti. Haiti was ruled by a dictatorship since really the inception. Haiti was the first free Black republic in the Western Hemisphere, and since that time, there's been a series of dictatorships, unfortunately, in the country. And so, in the 70s, a lot of professionals, teachers, educators, doctors left the country because it was just getting really bad. And so, my parents were part of that. A lot of my family. Most of my family all immigrated either to the U.S., some went to France because of the French speaking, and there's Haitian Creole, and then also Canada, Montreal, which is has a very large Haitian community. I used to spend my summers in Montreal with my family as well. So my mom was a nurse, so she actually had some connections there in Michigan, through friendships that she had, and that's how we went. We actually ended up going to Michigan out of all places. We did not go to New York, but we went to Michigan.
My goodness.
Everybody goes to New York.
Yeah, of course. Well, your family chose a different path. So what informed you through your education growing up, Dhalia, to pursue the particular college path that you did?
Okay, so education was number one in my family. So per my parents, and this is something that my sister and I grew up listening and hearing, that you just have to get your education. Education is key. There was never a discussion about college or master's. It was that we were going to go the full route. And so that's really how we lived our lives. You know, both my sister and I did very well in school. I think we enjoyed school, which I think was a blessing for my parents and a lot easier. And so, you know, we went to Catholic school, K through 12, and then I ended up going to Michigan State for my undergraduate. And then later on, I received my master's. And my sister did the same thing. She went to Michigan State for her undergraduate, and later on, she went and received her master's as well. And so while at Michigan State, I actually went in as an engineer, believe it or not, because I was math and science were my strong suits, my strong
awesome
subject. And so my parents were like, you know, you could either be, and these were the options, because the options were you could be a doctor, you could be an attorney, or you could be an engineer, and that was it. And my
three
mom
options,
was like,
pick one.
3 options. And my mother was like, at no point are you going to be a nurse. Even though she's a nurse, right? And I mean, loved her job, but she just felt like there was other opportunity for us, or business, which my sister ended up going to business. And I ended up going into engineering at Michigan State. Then I changed because it wasn't my heart, honestly. And I have a hard time doing things that I'm, you know, my heart, I was good at it, but it just wasn't where I wanted to go. So I ended up switching it. And of course I went liberal arts and decided to do psychology. And you can imagine my parents were like, what are you going to do with a psychology degree? Hello?
The horror.
It was like, what is going on? You know, but, you know, I stay true to myself, which I've often done in my life, even with, you know, my parents talking in my ear. I originally wanted to be a psychologist, but I just decided at some point that after I graduated, I didn't want to go straight through my PhD and end up getting into social services, interestingly enough. And through there, I started working in with foster care, you know, and working with contracts with the state, through just nonprofit, you know, the nonprofit and private sector. That was my first, that's kind of my first career path. And I really enjoyed it a lot, but the money wasn't there, you know? And so over time, I left social services and got into healthcare, still working, you know, with people and contracts, which I've always enjoyed doing. Contracts, and let me just take a little step back. Contracts is a way for me to do my writing, which was a love of mine since I was little, but professionally, right? Writing contracts, writing proposals, you know, expressing, even though it's not the fun stuff that people think about, it's still, that's my way of expressing myself through words, even though they're professional or technical words. You understand?
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. That's great. So it looks like you came out to San Diego. What year was that?
That was 2005. And let me tell you, it was a plan. I started thinking about it many years prior. I remember my girlfriend and I going on a Hawaii trip, and I remember asking myself, why am I still in Michigan? I had a good upbringing. I had a good upbringing. I did. But you know how you're somewhere and you feel like this really isn't where I feel like I want to be or I need to be. And I didn't want to look back and say, well, why didn't you just try it? You know, I spent some time in California after Michigan State, loved it. And then it just always stuck with me, like all those years. Like I'm talking, you know, 10, 15 years, it just stuck with me through having my daughter. And then at the time I had just had my son. At 7 months old, I sold my house. I told my family, and I'm moving to San Diego, and I left. And that was October 18th, 2005, on the plane to San Diego. It was crazy. It could have gone. Now that I look back, I think it could have gone either way. But you know how there's something just driving you to just go forward? That's how I felt at the time. I was like, you know what? I didn't want to look back. I just want to keep going forward. And I've learned in my life is that whenever I've hesitated and I haven't listened to that little voice inside of me, that's when things go wrong. And I was like, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
listen to this voice. And I did. And it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I'm glad you found your way to San Diego. And it looks like you spent really a big part of your career at Qualcomm,
Yes.
which we'll get to. But was your first job landing in San Diego with LG, the electronics company?
Yes, so I landed a job there. It was a short-term contract position in the legal department working on contracts, which is what I had my
Mm-hmm.
experience in. So I did that, and then months into it, I got a call from one of the, recruitment companies that I work with, and they were like, "Oh, there's this position opening at this company. We think it would be a good fit." And so I had, a phone interview, and then another interview, and they had me come in. And I didn't know anything about Qualcomm because I'm from the Midwest, so Qualcomm isn't as well known out there, right? At the time, I had no idea what this company was all about, and I had never been in technology. But they were looking for someone with my eclectic background, and it just was a fit. And then there you go. The rest is history. I stayed there for 12 years.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I know that's how we initially, interacted.
Yes.
Hera Hub has been involved, thanks to Navrina Singh and the work with QWise, with some of the initiatives there at Qualcomm. So talk a little bit about your work and your passion to, as I mentioned in the intro, to create some of this programming specifically for women and women of color. Just talk about how that transpired.
Oh, absolutely. So, I've always been about like hashtag girl power, hashtag black girl magic. You know what I mean? That's me. In the 60s, I would be that woman in the street, like fighting for for the civil rights and voting rights and all that stuff. That's me. And so here I am at a technology company, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they have these employee networks, and the employee networks are making, they're coming together and making, or influencing the lives of employees. And as you know, there's not a lot of women in tech, right? And so I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be part of that in whatever way that I could be. And I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technologist, but I always tell people in my heart, I'm a technologist. And so I really wanted to be part of that. And so I got involved in QWise initially, and it just led into me eventually getting onto the board, and then eventually becoming the treasurer and then the president. And I also then got involved in Quad, which is the African American diversity group, and then also involved in, eventually, the last couple of years, a diversity council was established with all of the employee-led networks. And so we would work together and identify ways that we can collaborate and influence the company. And I can give you some examples. For example, QWise is still the largest employee network. And so we would really work with women and identify like what was important, like what do you need here at this company? And so we would just, do focus groups or do summits or conferences and, bring speakers in such as yourself to kind of, give, empower us as women in the technology world to make things better for ourselves, things like that.
Yeah.
On the other end, on the African American side, so one of the things that and I have a specific story for this one. One of the things that we acknowledged that there wasn't a lot of Black employees coming through the pipeline, or even Black interns. And so there was twofold. So we challenged the talent management department, like, what's going on? And they were like, well, we can't find Black employees. We can't find Black interns. I'm like, where are you looking? Where do you look? Sometimes, because we're out there, where are you looking? Like, we can't find the women. Well, where are you looking? So, at the time, they were pulling from the same 10, for example, the same 10 universities they always pull. And I said, we got to look beyond. So we got to. This was a multi-year effort. I just want to say, but at the end of, I think it was year 3, Qualcomm ended up signing signing a partnership with Prairie View in Texas, which is a historically Black college and university. And also because of some of the effort with QWise and Quad and bringing female internships, we're seeing interns coming through, but they're like men. I mean, they're boys, they're students, and there's not a lot of women. We were like, what's going on? And so we, with Qualcomm, started partnering through the influence of these of our employee networks to work with NCWIT, to work with DECA, to get these students who were, students of color. And so now when you see the internship program at Qualcomm, when those kids are coming through, I was like, hello, you know what I mean? There it is. That's the impact. That's the impact.
That is awesome.
All of, and that's
lesson is you got to be looking in the right places for sure.
and put yourself out there. When people are like, well, I always say, it's okay to vent and have all these, all these things are going on. You're not happy about it. Then what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And so that's how I challenge myself. What am I going to do about it? How am I going to influence or, bring change? You got to step outside your comfort zone. You got to figure out what can we do to make things better?
Absolutely. And this is such an important topic for so many companies these days. I mean, there's, from Qualcomm and other large technology companies, and well beyond that, this initiative, which is so critical to really be inclusive, to think about diversity and inclusion in very different ways. So talk two things. I'm going to kick off this question with something that I just heard recently, and then let's lead into the work that you're doing around that with your consulting firm, and some of the things you've been up to, and we'll talk about where you're going with this. But this was if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a TED Talk that I saw not too long ago, and of course can't remember the gentleman's name, but the gist of it was, the talk was about diversity and inclusion. And the gist of what he was saying is, yes, diversity and inclusion is so critically important, but what about the idea of simply belonging? What if we moved, not moved away from the phrase diversity and inclusion, but from the concept perspective, it's about making sure everybody feels like they belong, that they're part of this, that they're part of something bigger. So I wanted to just ask for your thoughts or initial reaction to that thought process. And then let's dive into some of the work that you've been doing with your consulting company over the last, 10 or so months, and where that's going.
Okay. So I do agree that ultimately that's what we're trying to get to, right? We want to feel like we belong, whether it's at your workplace, at your school, in any environment that you find yourself in. But it's part of a bigger picture. I mean, it starts with diversity, it leads to inclusion, and then it's belonging. There's many parts to it, and it needs to happen, circularly. I can't even pronounce that, circularly, right? So, right, you can't look at one. So then you have to ask yourself, so how are we going to make this particular person or a group of people feel like they belong? Well, then you have to think about, we need to bring them, or we need to have them be able to access whatever is out there. So that's the diversity. We need to have the conversation with them, and they have to be leaders, and we have to listen, and we need to implement and involve them in any type of change management that's going on, say in a company. That's inclusion. And then the belonging will come. It will come. That's what I think. That's a good point. That's like the outcome you're going towards. That's the outcome you're going towards. I think people hear diversity. I've heard this, and I really don't understand it. So so people hear diversity and they cringe. Oh my God, diversity. But you know what? It's part of a bigger path to inclusion, to belonging. These are just words. How we define them, that's up to us. As we're individually accountable for how we define this. to put a negative, like for example, to put a negative spin on just the word diversity, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We define diversity as how we see it, and then we move along with that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dhalia, you gave such a great example with the intern program specifically, which is, if we don't pay attention to this, if we don't take steps, as companies, as, social groups, whatever it is, to go find those people, right? Just like you said, if you're pulling from the same pool and the same people on the other side of the table, the folks hiring, if you will, all have sort of a same pattern, right? And we talk a lot about this in investing, angel investing, venture capital, the concept of pattern recognition. It's, I see myself in this individual. This was me, 20, 30 years ago. I can identify with this person. I can relate to this person. Sadly, that is kind of built into a lot of, processes. And for some people, they're just totally unconscious of it, right? And so to your point,
absolutely.
I think, we have to we have to be thinking differently about these things.
We do, and and the thing is, it's not about pointing fingers. We all, when you look at us from an individual perspective, we are all a work in progress. Who I was 10 years ago is not who I am today. And hopefully I've gotten better over the years. You know what I mean? I extend that to the group. We make decisions in the workplace that may not work, maybe they were not such great decisions, but now let's get back to the table and make it better. That's all I think when we're talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace or in organizations. That's what the people who are behind it, pushing it, that's really what they're saying. Let's just make it better because we're not doing enough. And it's not a situation. No one's pointing fingers. And I think sometimes people may internalize it. I think it's a very human thing to internalize it. To say, well, or to become defensive. And that's not what it is. It's just like, what, let's just kind of do something different and make it even better because the world is changing and there's enough of this. I always say this, there's enough of the pie. Me giving or us opening up, right? Opening it up for other people and providing access, that's not going to take away from you because there's so much out there. There's so much opportunity and the world is growing in different ways. And so there's opportunities in all of it.
Absolutely.
And so that's what and that's what I'm trying to do right now is primarily I've actually gotten back into the nonprofit world. That was like my start, and that's like my center, my passion. There's a couple of challenges in the nonprofit organizations, and so I've been involved with the Chamber of Commerce. I've been involved with BAPAC and other types of diversity-led organizations. Just most recently, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. But I think we need to all collaborate. But there's some challenges out there, even in the diversity and inclusion world, that apply to nonprofits. And I'm trying to, part of what I want to do in my business, and is expand on that, is how can we, for example, is it okay if I use an example?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So for example, a lot of nonprofit organizations right now are led by majority people, meaning majority white boards. The board of directors or the executive leadership are led by white individuals, but the population they serve aren't necessarily like them, right? And so one way is driving more and there's a stereotype that, for example, Black leaders, they don't want to go into nonprofit. That's not really their scope, which is not true. It's there are some bias and explicit bias because it's not intentional, I believe, in a lot of cases. Explicit bias, implicit bias that we're not bringing in people of color in these executive leaderships on the boards. Similar to the women's initiative of Women on Boards initiative that's going on right now. You know, when you look at the majority of board of directors, they're white males. That's not saying that there's not a lot of wonderfully capable women out there who can fill those positions, but they're not getting the access. It is not about qualifications. It's about capability. The capability is there, but we're not recognizing it.
Well, and it goes back to this pattern recognition conversation, right? So I've served on a couple nonprofit boards. I'm on 2 currently. And I can tell you the conversation around the table goes something like this, and you've probably been part of this conversation. Okay, we need X number of new board members for this new term. Who do you know? Let's go recruit, right? But if everybody sitting around the table are, you know, accomplished white gentlemen, that's who their network is. And so they're just going to go out and recruit more people that are like themselves, right?
Exactly. And so I feel like it's an opportunity to maybe educate and understand the thought process and help maybe, you know, redefine how these boards, for example, or how these nonprofit leaders are looking when they're recruiting people to come on and provide services, even whether it's executive leaders or leaders who are out there in the field. Because trust and believe that when you're going into, say, for example, an urban area, let's take San Diego, for example, you're going into the southeast side of San Diego, okay, and they don't see anyone that looks like them, there's less of an impact. And too often, there's also that savior complex, and I think we're all guilty of it, where you know, you're passionate about something and you're going in and you're going to solve the world's problem, but you don't get the people who you're trying to solve the problem for involved, and that could be the community that you're serving. You know, I call that the savior complex, and I think we've all been. I know I've been guilty of it, and I've had to pull myself back and say, you know, what am I really trying to accomplish? So these are the things that I'm trying to work on in my own personal business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dhalia, let's talk a little more. You've talked a little bit about some of the work you are doing now, but let's talk a little more about that decision to go out on your own. Frankly, okay, I'm done. I'm done with the corporate thing. I'm moving out on my own. And what was that process like and that decision like?
So a little scary, but it was so needed. I remember I'd been thinking about leaving for a couple of years, but I felt like, you know, I just thought there was something different in the future, in the horizon for me. And I wanted to do more into the D&I space. I wanted to work more with women or people or change management. And that opportunity just wasn't there for me to the extent that I wanted it to be. And I've always wanted to be I've always wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to work for myself. I wanted to get into writing more, which has always been a passion of mine. And so an opportunity came my way last year, and I took it. And I remember thinking before that happened, I remember that Dhalia who sold her house, took her 7-month-old child, and my daughter at the time, I didn't mention my daughter was 9.5 years old, and just took a risk. I was like, where did she go? Because I've been playing it safe for way too long. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I had to tap into that person, and so for me, it was just walking through the fear that I had of what's going to happen. How am I going to support my family? But I think I just had to believe in myself a little bit more and just do it. Because sometimes when you don't think about it, just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. And it's a year later. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm still alive and functioning. The house is still I'm paying my bills.
There's still food on the table. Amazing.
It's amazing, but I just had to take I had to take a chance. Because I think I mentioned earlier, I just want to be where I want to be just whatever I decide to do in my life. I want to be happy and happiness means many things for for all of us. But the freedom that I have right now as an entrepreneur and the ability, I love that, even though I'm not sure what's going to happen next month or the month after that. But I'm just doing it. You know what I mean? My experience at Qualcomm was fantastic. It really prepared me for so many things that I didn't even realize it prepared me for. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I've taken that, and that's been part of it. I grew I've half my adult life. I feel like I grew up in that company, and so I will always be very grateful for the experiences that I've had, and I've taken that with me in the next version of myself, because I feel like we do reinvent ourselves, don't we? Especially we as women during this. I'm not gonna, in the Middle Ages. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, man, I do. But it's at many points in our life we have to reinvent ourselves, and I'm always curious if men feel the same way, that they have to reinvent themselves. Most men I talk to don't really identify with that concept as much as women do.
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Well,
that would be a good research project, though.
I know, seriously. So many research projects on my list. So much I'm curious about. Well, Dhalia, I want to wrap up our conversation with what's on the horizon for your business. What are you focused on moving forward?
So I think what I'd like to do is continue expanding in the D&I space and working with nonprofits and identifying some opportunities for them in developing more inclusive environments that will eventually impact the communities that they serve. In addition, I really want to expand I'm doing a lot of writing. So many opportunities are just coming my way. I want to continue to do that and hopefully start writing. I'd like to write a couple books about just my experience and what I'm finding, and articles and blog posts and things like that. So I'll definitely be working more on that for this next year.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, exciting stuff. I'm excited to see what continues to come up for you in our conversation. A few ideas have come to mind of folks that I need to connect you with. So we'll do that here soon. Absolutely. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, Dhalia, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is through my LinkedIn account, which is just Dhalia Balmir. So it's Dhalia Balmir, B as in boy, Almir. And my email account is the best way. It's dhaliabalmir@gmail.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Dhalia.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.